the main topic today is really about uncovering the fears we have as founders. So if we're those entrepreneurial leaders, we've started a business, we founded a business, what are we really scared of when it comes to bringing in that sort of more corporate-y feel kind of non-exec directors? What are they going to do to our business? So let's talk about those fears today and see if we can hopefully alleviate them and make them feel as if they're not quite so scary after all, so that your businesses can move on and grow as a result. So what drives me and what drives Serdar is this concept of, good directors, they grow companies, but great directors really change lives. So what we want to do as an organization is have a meaningful economic impact, and we do that through working with boards. What I love about this whole great directors change lives line is that it really focuses you on that making a difference. You have to be a great director in order to make a difference. You have to be and understand what it's all about and do it properly. So that's what drives us as Serdar. That's what drives me as an independent director and independent chairman on various boards. And I hope as you get into this story and start alleviate your fears and start to think about building a board if you don't have one already, that you can start to get to experience what a difference it makes when you've really got great directors. So let's put the poll up, Jenny, just to get a sense of who's in the room in terms of whether you are a shareholder manager, which means you're wearing all the hats. You are just an executive director, you are a non-exec director. And if you are multiple of these, then please let me know. So if you are an executive director in one organization, but a non-executive director in another one, then please tick the box. And obviously, if you're an aspiring non-exec director, that's also useful to know, because we want to know if you want to move into this space, and hopefully I can answer any questions you might have. And then as we go along, please drop questions into the Q&A box. Jenny will be monitoring that, and if there's anything relevant, Jenny, please just let me know in the session. Speak up, shout at me, tell me there's a question that needs to be answered as we go through, so we don't miss it, and we can talk in context. So it looks like we've got quite a good spread of shareholder managers and executive directors. That's fantastic. So that's really the audience we're hoping for. Is, are you in that space of being a founder, being a leader in an organization, and potentially had some of these fears about what it's all about, bringing in non-exec directors? So just end that poll. Thanks, Jenny. If you want to share the results, that would be cool, just so everyone has a good understanding. Good spread. So pretty even on the shareholder manager, executive directors. And we've got a couple of non-exec directors as well, and aspiring non-exec directors. So it's fantastic. Let me just move my little screens around here. Cool. So what are you afraid of? As I said, please put into the question box if you have a specific question that you want to get answered, in case we don't cover it during the webinar. And also just, I think, why is this sort of thought of bringing non-executive directors into your business so scary? So please put that poll up, Jenny, of just answering that question. So we've got a few options there. I don't want strangers in my business. So we've been working as a family, we've been working as a close-knit group, we've built this business. We don't want to bring in strangers. They're a little bit scary, we don't trust them, and how's that going to work? I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want a boss. And so many of us start businesses because we've left a corporate and we don't want a boss. So we want to become the boss, whether we like it or not. But that thought of being held accountable it's not something we wanted to do. It's why we went into business in the first place. And bringing in non-exec director or bringing in independent chairman can feel a bit like you're bringing in a boss. So they might take over my business. So you've got someone in a position of control as a director. They can make decisions. Are they going to take the business away from me? Are they going to go in a different direction, lead the business in a different direction? I don't want the business to be corporate. So it's a very real fear that we see these large organizations, very bureaucratic, take forever to make decisions. We're a nimble entrepreneurial business, we make decisions quickly. And if we set up this thing called a board and we bring in non-exec directors, there is this belief that things get slowed down. And it's not the case in reality. If you've got an effective board, if you've got the right kinds of directors on your board, then it shouldn't slow you down. It should make you a little bit more considerate of making a decision, but it shouldn't slow you down so that you miss opportunities. Good, so we've got loss of control, we've got, okay, one other. Fear of unknown, other, whoever answered the other, please put that in the chat box. I'd just be interested to know what your fear is, so that we can make sure I cover it. But otherwise, we'll definitely be covering this loss of control and fear of the unknown. And that's a very real fear. So quite a large proportion of you, well, the majority of you, very worried about this high cost, low value thing. So I'll talk a lot about what is the value of a non-exec director and of a board as a whole. So yes, whoever that was who put in the other, please can just pop that in the chat box. I'd love to know what your other one was. So they'll slow you down. So we'll go through those three main areas: loss of control, fear of the unknown, and high cost, low value. And the first one, fear one, loss of control. So we had 19% of you who said that this was one of your fears. The main thing to understand in your business is what game I'm playing. Because if you are playing what we refer to as a craft versus an enterprise, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment, then loss of control isn't a real factor, because actually a board's not necessarily going to add much value if you're playing that game. So the understanding of the game of business is that, are you playing a solo sport? Are you playing a tennis, a squash, a golf? And it's very much about you. To driving this business forward is very much about you. Or are you playing a team sport? Are you playing a rugby, a cricket, a hockey? Because that's a very different way of playing both a sport and playing in business. So if you're playing that individual sport, if you're an individual tennis player, if Nadal's not having a good day, then Federer's going to beat him. If Federer's not having a good day, Nadal's going to beat him. If they're not on the court, they can't move forward. Their business basically stops. They're not playing tennis unless they're on that court. And if that's your business, if you are not on the court, if you are not playing, the business doesn't move forward because of the way the business is being constructed. It's a craft business reliant on the master craftsman. Then actually a board's not really going to help you. And unless you really want to find out a little bit more about how boards work, which we'll be talking about now, this is not the conversation that you need to be having, actually, frankly. It should be thinking about your business as more of a sole proprietor, thinking of yourself as a master craftsman that really operates at their peak in their space. But it's not about running a large team and bringing people in and out as and when necessary. It's about making sure you have the skill and ability to really take that forward. Team is very different. We're bringing in people. Someone's injured, someone else comes in, takes their place. The team may not operate quite as well as it would have done otherwise, but it still manages to get on the pitch. It still manages to have and go forward and finish the game. And business that's set up on a team basis is very much the same. It's not reliant on individuals to anything like the same extent. So a typical craft kind of business would be a one-man show, like the food truck. An enterprise would be a McDonald's, where you've got the business, the engine, the franchisor is developed a system. It's building teams and pushing them into the different franchises. It's got revenue from the property. It's got revenue from the license fees and the franchise fees that are coming in from those individual McDonald's stores. Whereas the craft business is very much reliant on you, your input, your time, your skill, your abilities. So make that choice. So if you're a craftsman, it's all about your skill and ability, your own knowledge. Utilizing your own knowledge in your craft, sharing your knowledge with those others in your team, and building up a team of supporters who are effectively learning how to do your job so they can cover off some of the elements of it. But you're not building a diverse team that has very different skills, that covers off different areas of the business, while you maybe focus on a specific role like sales or a specific role like innovation. So it's very different, and it's effectively about owning the job, which is sometimes quite difficult to get your head around. But if you are the person that's driving the business, if you are the main reason this business exists, then effectively you own the job. because if you take yourself out, there isn't a business left. There isn't something that you can sell easily. Maybe a client base, maybe some assets, but other than that, there's not much there. There's not the same kind of value as if you would build an enterprise which is able to operate without your immediate involvement. If you go away for a week, a month, a year, then the business has the potential to be able to continue. And if it's been set up correctly, it might even do better if you're not there. If you're holding it back, if you're the one that's stopping the team operate efficiently and effectively, the business may even do better if you're not there on a day-to-day basis. And that's really a good test for whether you're building an enterprise or whether you're building a craft. So you cannot control everything if you're going to build an enterprise. You need to delegate. You need to be able to let this thing expand and not hold it back. So as I said, if you are running a craft business, if you are running a business which is effectively a job, then really the concept of a board is not really applicable, is not necessarily going to add value. So if you understand the difference and you understand which business you're playing, then that comes into the conversation about how does a board add value. And the second principle, that the business itself must have significant value. You can sell it at significant multiples because it's systemized, because you've got a team that knows and understands how this thing works. You can bring in other players as and when someone leaves or when you grow and a new role's formed and the business continues. It's not about an individual. So it's nothing to do with you. It's all about the team. The game rules are different. So just like the game rules between golf and cricket or whatever are different, then the game rules of business, of craft versus enterprise, are also very different. It's separate and distinct from you. And what I'm now talking about is a proper business that has the need for an understanding of the difference between shareholders, directors, and managers, because they are in different teams that have different roles and they bring different aspects to that business that allows it to build into a way where it has a value of its own, where it's not as reliant on the founder as it might have been otherwise. And you must delegate to others. So one of the critical things if you are building an enterprise is understanding the phase of growth, because again, just like if you're building a craft, then there's very little need for a properly formed board. If you're building an enterprise, but it's still at an early stage, there's also not necessarily the readiness or the ability for the business to support a board properly. So you need to think about where the business is on those phases of growth. And the sweet spot for something that's typically more like a craft is this sort of founder stage, or the crisis of leadership. You're starting to hand over things and move into the space where you're delegating. But really, it's only once you get into that sort of middle section where it's starting to, I've handed a lot of stuff over, now I'm going through that crisis of autonomy. I'm delivering and growing through delegation and moving into a crisis of control, where I've delegated everything, but I haven't quite put in the mechanisms to make sure I'm managing things properly. So if you're in that shift from I've delegated or just started delegating things, then that's a good place to start thinking about when are we going to bring other directors in, because that's part of your delegation process. You're delegating some of your decision making to other people. You don't have to do it all on your own. And especially when you started to get to the point where the business is reaching those areas where you've delegated a lot of the operational responsibilities, we don't necessarily have the mechanisms in place yet to be able to control them effectively. Again, that's another way where a board can really add value, because it's about processes, it's about policies, but the right processes and the right policies, and not making this organization too corporate. Thinking about it as a private or family business, not as a big listed company. And they are very different in the way they operate and the way boards operate in those contexts. So make a choice. Have I and am I building a craft? Then look at being the best you can be at that craft. And don't worry so much about directorship, because ultimately, if there's any problem with the business, they're going to come to you as the main person who's doing the delivery, the main person who's making the decisions anyway. If you want to go down the route, or you've already started down the route towards building enterprises all about a team, then it's really important to start planning. When does it make sense to start bringing in potentially the independent chairman as the first step? And then when do we build the board, train up the executives, etc., to really start to use it properly? So it's thinking about, I can't do this all on my own. I've sort of put this facade out to the world to say, I can do everything, but actually I can't. And we need to understand what are our blind spots. So we need to reach out to others. We need to go to mentors, go and do some education programs, come to the likes of someone like us, Serdar, where we've been down this journey before, and we can help guide you to move forward and uncover those blind spots so that you know what you need to do next. But very much as a leader of an enterprise, we need to be growing faster than the business is. Our world needs to be bigger than the business is yet to give it room to expand into. So we've got to make sure that we're getting coaching, that we've got mentors to help and take us to the next level, that we're reading all the time, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and in order to be able to have the capacity to take the business to the next level. And that's where this investment in ourselves really comes in. So Buffett says a lot, best investors in yourself. So are you investing that 10% of your income into developing yourself? As an organization, are you putting money aside to make sure you're developing your team, etc., etc.? Because that's one of the fundamental foundations of allowing an enterprise to grow, is making sure the capacity of the individuals is growing, because that then gives you the space to come behind that growth and build the business and grow the business. So just what is this thing? What is this role of a director? I've made the choice. Fantastic. I've decided that I don't need to be fearful of losing control because I'm going to just carry on in that space. I'm going to do a craft. Fantastic. Now I'm a little bit nervous. I want to move into the space of being an enterprise. A little bit nervous about what that means in terms of what this whole role of directorship is about. And the main role of a director is strategy, leadership, and governance. So it's important to understand and have developed a strategy. And it's all important to start maybe thinking about how do you bring other people into that conversation that can help you define a better strategy. If historically you've always done it on your own, then maybe get in a consultant to help go through a strategic development process, to get a feel for what that's like, to get to see and understand the value of someone else's opinion and perspective on your business. And as I talked about earlier, it's critical that directors are seen as leaders in the organization. So have you established a really clear idea of what the values are of this organization, what the culture is of this organization? Are you showing by example? Are the other execs showing by example? And the third part of a director is roles and responsibilities is of governance. So where are the policies and procedures? Are we following the law? Are we making sure that we're actually adhering to what it says in the Companies Act? It's a good idea to consider and at least work out which pieces of King 4 apply to you. You can't just ignore it, because at some point someone will ask the question, how does King 4 apply and what bits are you doing? And it's going to become more and more rigorous and more part of, as you grow, the way you do business and the questions that suppliers and clients, etc., will start asking about. So make sure you've got a strategy, make sure you've developed it with as many different perspectives brought into that conversation as possible. And then as directors, own that strategy. So even if it's just you, make sure you have one. It's written down, it's clearly defined, it's presented to and shared with the rest of the organization, and then lead by example. And then the third part, or the other part of what is governance, the governance piece is that policies and procedures. So the output of the board is strategic direction in terms of actions that the organization must take and its focus areas for the next month or quarter or year, and the policies and procedures that will help them get there. So this is the way we do this. This is the way we do that. So we're not second guessing all the time. When we're delegating effectively because people have got a list of the way we do things and the order we do things and where do I go to find the information. So we start to delegate properly by handing over the process to someone in such a way that they can run it without your input. And that's the key. If someone keeps coming back and asking questions, go and check it again. Maybe work out where the gaps are in the training, the induction, the policy, procedure, etc. So that's that first test of, am I actually moving into the space of proper delegation, or am I just thinking about it and not doing it effectively? Once it's effective, once you have those policies and procedures in place, then you can start to move to the next level and start thinking about how you control from a distance. What are the levers and what are the data you need to be able to see that all of these things are working effectively? And that's really truly where a board starts to add value, because it's got the framework, the system to work with. It's got an opportunity to get the people in the room's heads out of the weeds and start thinking clearly about what next. What is our 3 to 5 year, 10-year plan, not our 3 to 5 year, 3 to 5 week or month plan, which is what we tend to do when we're stuck in the operations. So how does the roles in the business, how the law sees the business? So critical foundations. We talked about when you found a business, you need to, or an enterprise, you need to start thinking about shareholders, directors, and managers. So actually, when you register a company, you would register a PTY. A PTY is designed to become an enterprise. It's not designed to be run by one person. And it really starts to add value when you start thinking about it from that much bigger context. So when you register a company, you have to determine who is the shareholder, or who are the shareholders, who is the director or the directors. And if you don't have management then you don't really have operations, because the business needs people in order to move. It's a juristic person, but it needs people to move its arms and legs and limbs and move forward. So if we don't understand what the role of a shareholder is, then what happens when we get an investment coming in? If we don't understand how they fit, we bring in a private equity investor, we even get a bank lending us money, they're going to start interrogating this business as if they are shareholders. And what is the board's role? What are the responsibilities of the board? Are different. They are very different. So we have this interesting concept where the shareholder is really looking at the business from a very selfish perspective. So the company, that juristic person, the shareholders have put money in or put time in, and they're expecting a return on investment. If they don't get a return on investment, then they may not hang around very long. And if you're not getting a return on investment, all the time and money and effort you've put into the business you founded, then why are you doing it? Why not put that time and effort and money somewhere else? We need to think very clearly with a shareholder hat, because we need to get a return on our investment. Otherwise, all we're doing is creating a job for ourselves. And that comes back to that craft concept. If it's an enterprise, a shareholder puts money in because they're going to get something back. And if you do it properly and the business is generating clear returns, generating dividends, then it's so much easier to get further investors and shareholders in the future. The part of the board is completely different, because a board is separated by that hard line from the shareholders, and it's a selfless relationship. So again, if you don't have different people in those two contexts, then it becomes really difficult to manage those two relationships effectively. So that's why an independent director joining a board is so critical, because the only role they have is that selfless role of doing everything in the best interests of the business with their director hat on. Management has a combination of the two. They have a contract. So they're delivering, should be selflessly based on that contract, their roles and responsibilities. But selfish relationships kick in when they're not getting remuneration or the promotion or the whatever else that comes from that contract, from that delivery. So if you're wearing all of those hats, and several of you on this list were shareholder managers, it's really important you start to try to separate them out by having different meetings, having space in your day, week, month, where you think about the business with just a shareholder hat on. Think about the business with just a director hat on when you're thinking about the strategy. And then management is the day-to-day. But if you don't separate them out, then you're missing an opportunity to move that organization properly and solidly towards becoming an enterprise that has value. So a high-performance director is one that's obsessed with creating meaningful economic impact and social impact through their role on the board and the role the company plays in the economy. So it's all about, excuse me, it's all about making sure that you have the tough conversations, you do the mundane stuff, you're enabled to enable the board's success. So being a director is about reading board papers, about interrogating the data that's in those board papers, asking good questions, being present in the meeting, etc., etc. That's what you're supposed to do. Too often directors are on a board, and we've all seen it, and that's the sort of context that most of us apply when we think about this thing called a director. Someone who's sitting in the room, they're only there for the meeting, they don't really add much value, they tend to only read the minutes or the board papers in the meeting, all of those kind of things. We've all heard those stories. That's not what a director should be doing. And we need to know better so that we can hold the directors that work with us accountable to be high performance directors, to be engaged, to be having those tough conversations, to be doing those mundane aspects effectively. And a high performance board is through this rhythm of decision making. So we made it before, a board should be making decisions. It should be going through a process and making decisions and holding the company accountable to a performance standard higher than it's ever had before. So it's that role of strategic oversight, owning the strategy, making the strategies being implemented, and making sure all of the elements of the organization have key performance indicators, have targets, have direction, so that they can be held accountable to perform at their best. And unfortunately, when we're founding an organization, it's really, really difficult to hold ourselves accountable to the level it should. And that gets seen by the rest of the organization. And the rest of the organization doesn't perform at the level it should because they can see the leadership is not doing what they're saying. Their actions don't tie up with their words. So if you've got someone completely independent in the room saying, guys, well, MD, CEO, this is what we said we were going to do. This is what you've agreed to do. Now let's get on with it. It's not having a boss. It's more having guidance on what we have agreed as a team that we're going to be doing, and then holding each other accountable to make sure it actually happens. So legally, the main things you need to be careful of are care, skill, and diligence. So it's also the fiduciary duties, the care, skill, and diligence, and fiduciary duties. And the fiduciary duties is this concept of utmost good faith to the company. So doing everything in the best interests of the company. And that includes all kinds of things to do with conflict of interest. And we see it with state-owned enterprise where there's huge numbers of conflicts happening and it's not in the best interest of the company. So make sure we're not doing the same things in our smaller organizations, that we're not doing things which were actually, they're benefiting us or they're benefiting other individuals, but they're not necessarily using company assets effectively. They're actually wearing out company assets, but not for company productive kind of work. So how do we distinguish what we're using things for that's a personal use and what are we using things for that are really helping to drive the business forward? Because as soon as you have someone from the outside, particularly someone coming in to invest, they're going to start to look at those things. It's going to be part of their due diligence when they try and come up with a value for your organization. How much have you separated yourself and your use of assets from the business and its use of assets? So that whole concept of not doing things for personal gain. And what's also becoming much more important now is understanding that it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. It's the journey, it's both. So there's the output element, what are you producing, but it's also how you got there. And we've seen it so often with supply chain investigations where someone's got a factory somewhere that's using child labor, or they're polluting the atmosphere, or they're polluting rivers, etc., etc. There's a lot more closer scrutiny on the how we do it, not just the output. And as directors, we need to be much more aware of those risks because we will be held liable ultimately if they're not in the best interests of the environment and the locals, and someone has some kind of claim for damages. So care is about approach to decision making. So as we're moving into this space, we need to overcome this fear of doing this thing by learning more about it, because we are already, by having our name as a director in the business, we're already liable for this stuff. So it's really important we know and learn and understand what it means so that we can mitigate that risk. Because otherwise what happens is we get something happening down the line somewhere, maybe next week, next month, 10 years time, but it could completely take us out, could be completely destroy the business if we haven't been aware of it and we didn't do something about it. So it's making sure you take care, but that you also have the skill. So the Companies Act requires that we have training as directors, that we improve our understanding of legislation, etc., etc., and we improve our craft as directors. We improve our skill as directors. It's part of what we are supposed to be doing. And diligence is that preparation, attention to detail, making sure we read the documents, we prepare the documents, etc. So doing all of those things, these are the three things that would be measured if anybody comes and questions what you've been doing in your business. So be aware of them. Start working towards making sure that you're applying all of them. So leadership governance is continual work in progress. So this was the big one. This was the one that 44% of you said you were worried about. So let's dig into this one. And it really comes down to, as I said, understanding what this whole thing is about. What is the value of this board? And we see it has got three elements. So we've talked about making sure you've got independent directors because you've got an independent perspective. Make sure you've got skilled directors who've got the right training, who understand the roles and responsibilities, the care, skill, and diligence, and fiduciary duties, etc. So whether you're an internal exec director, it applies, but it also applies to someone you're bringing into your organization. As long as you know what to expect and you know what to ask in terms of questions, then you're more likely to get a better quality director, just like you're employing someone in your operations. You need to know and understand what questions to ask of those individuals so that you get the right person coming into your organization. So then you can start building a proper team of directors. But it's also broader than just the team of directors. It's also about the team that supports the board. So does your executive team understand the process around how a board works? Do they understand how to prepare a board paper so you can go through it in a board meeting and actually use it usefully and make decisions quickly? And the methodology is that process part, that rhythm part we talked about in terms of what does a high performance board look like. So how often do you have meetings? How often and when do you have your pre-board meetings where you go through the agenda between the chairman and the managing director? How do you manage in the meeting? What's the flow of your agenda? What papers and templates do you use as part of the board pack? How do you present your minutes? All of that kind of stuff is the methodology piece. And typically we're not taught that. We may not even be aware of what's supposed to be in that thing. But if we've got all three of those elements working effectively and efficiently, then we can really, really start to leverage the performance of the business. And that's a primary value of why we're doing this thing. We want to improve company performance. We want to make it more profitable. We want to make it more valuable. We want to make it more effective so it has a bigger impact, et cetera, et cetera. And the way to shift that ball, shift that rock, is if you've got a strong boardroom and strong directors held together by a strong methodology. Is that lever. So if you don't have if you have board meetings randomly or twice a year or 3 times a year, you're not going to build any kind of momentum. So you're not going to build the performance and output that you need to really shift company performance. If you don't have strong enough directors who don't stand up and make decisions or contribute effectively, they're just sitting there and twiddling their thumbs during a meeting, then you're not going to get the value and you're not going to shift the company performance. And if the board composition, the way that you've built this team, do you have different viewpoints? Do you have different skill sets? Are you building complete decisions because you have every nuance covered by having diverse board members, by having different skill sets on their board, as I said? And one of the key things which is often overlooked is the personality profile. And by which we mean some people are very good at spotting the people issues and others are very good at spotting the data issues. Some people are very good at coming up with new ideas and strategy and others are much better at implementing them. If you don't have all of those voices in the boardroom, you're going to miss something. You're going to take the organization off in a direction which may not be sustainable or even appropriate and may even be risky or possibly illegal. So it's important to have all of these elements together. And if you get it to work, it's like a smooth running engine. It starts to really fly and you really start to build a momentum and the business starts to roll and you really start to shift the performance of the organization. So that's really how this whole thing works. That's the true value of getting non-exec directors in the business. If you build it, non-exec directors plus strong board composition, plus a really good methodology, then you start to get the value and shift company performance, and should be shifting company performance way more than all of the rest of the stuff costs to implement. So have a think about that and definitely get in touch with us. This diagram pretty much defines what we do. We help train directors, we help build boards, and ultimately, and use a specific methodology and ultimately help you shift company performance. So there are reasons why we invest in other companies, expect there to be more than 1 or 2 directors. We inherently know that a board supports business growth and increases value. Should the listed companies have more than 1 director? If we were putting our money into another company, we'd be a bit nervous if it was all on one person, because what happens if that person gets sick? They can't perform at the level they were before, they don't sell effectively as they were before, then how's my investment going to pan out? We apply those rules to other things, but we don't necessarily apply them very effectively to the business that we are running, founding, operating. There's a survey report we've done, some very useful data that came out of that. I'm happy to, Jenny, I just want to check, do you want to put a link for the survey download, or will it be included in an email that follows this webinar?
It will be included in the email, but I'm happy to put it in the chat as well.
Okay, so just put it in the chat, and if anybody wants to download it, then that's great. Oh, thank you for your other, Joel. Sorry, I've missed that reporting burden. So yes, the reporting burden really comes down to trying to make sure, or reducing the fear of reporting burdens, trying to make sure the reports are effective. So use short, concise, summarized templates to guide decision-making process. So your cover page for making a decision should be a 1-pager. That's part of the methodology. It should clearly lay out who this is from, what's the reason for it being in the board papers, what do you hope, what's been done before, what considerations have been taken so far, and then what are the options that we're considering, so that you can start to have a proper discussion. Okay, we've got 4 or 5 things we need to talk about here. We've got a whole bunch of backing material. I know what to look for in that backing material. Now we can have a proper discussion, and then we can move to the next step, which is the decision, where we've got 2, 3 options to choose from. And that's it. We've done the discussion. We've summarized the discussion. We've done the background research. Today, these are the options, and we must pick one, so that you start making decisions more quickly, but more effectively, because you've channeled everybody and guided everybody on not second guessing everything, all the work you've already done before, because it's actually there, it's presented, saying this is what we've considered, and these are reasons, pros and cons, why we've chosen a particular outcome. And that starts to reduce the amount of reporting and the huge packs of paper that typically boards wade through, which don't add value. We should be looking at 1-page summaries with backing information if you need it, and it should be enough for us to interrogate the topic and move it forward quickly. So as I said, the survey was done really to give you an understanding of what remuneration looks like, so you can see what the costs are of directors, and it's much less than you might think. I mean, typically, the directors we're placing on small private companies, you're talking from nothing, because there's plenty of people who want to do something to give back, or they want to be a director for their first director position because they want to build confidence and skill, and that they need to apply knowledge because they've done a course, and up to maybe 10, 20,000 a month for someone who's quite skilled. We're not talking about the same kind of cost that you would have for a listed company. We're not talking about R1 million a year or executive kind of salaries. Generally, non-exec directors in private businesses are not that expensive at all for the level of skill you're tapping into, for the level of experience, etc., that you're tapping into. And the stats are that you need to have at least 1 independent director, and the boards that I've served on definitely backs that up. So independent directors was considered to add the most value in the boards that were surveyed. Boards with at least 1 independent director outperformed those without. And the higher the percentage of independent directors, the higher the board's performance score. So if you've got more independent voices, it helps hold the management a little bit more accountable, but it also shakes you up and stops you getting stuck in a rut, because you've got fresh ideas, you've got different perspectives coming into play, and you can start to really move strategy forward and think about things you might not have even considered before, because you were so stuck in the operations and stuck in the weeds. And I've really seen that on the boards I've served on, where we've shifted so much quicker than we could have shifted if we tried to do it with just the executive team. So boards without independent directors are less likely to report an increase in EBITDA. That's what it comes down to. So we want people that can see different perspectives. So this example is what a deer sees. A deer is red-green colorblind, and I don't know if you can pick it up, and it may be because you've seen the stripes before, or you've seen the shape of the leg before, or you've got some concept of what this this shape is all about. This is a tiger, but it takes some interpolation based on some perspectives we've already got. If you've never seen a tiger before, you're really unlikely to pick the particular features that show what it looks like based on a black and white photograph or a red-green colorblind photograph. So what we're looking for is directors who can see in Technicolor. And what by that I mean, you've got different individuals who can see the different aspects of a picture. So together as a team, you build up a full picture. And the danger in the forest stands out like a sore thumb, because you can see this bit and that bit and that bit, and you add them all up and you go, wow, that is a tiger. I recognize the leg, I recognize the stripes, I recognize the color, it's in the bushes. That's probably a tiger. Then you can start thinking about, well, is that a risk? Yes, it could eat us, or that's an opportunity. We're a game park that's going to bring massive new revenue. But you can, if you can see the problem clearly, or see the opportunity clearly, because you have multiple perspectives, you're much less likely to miss it or get caught out by it. So it's really important. That's part of the diversity part of the board, and why profile is so important, because we want to bring people in who clearly see opportunities. It's the way their brain works. They can see them everywhere. You also need to see the problem, bring in the people who can see the problem anywhere. And if you bring the two together and you work together, then hopefully we can come up with a better whole. And also bring in the people who can, the individuals who can see the people problem. How do we inspire the team? How do we build a better culture? How do we take this organization forward? How do we do sales better? How do we engage with our clients better, et cetera, et cetera? But you also need someone in the room to go, well, hold on, we're spending way too much on that. We're not getting a return on investment. And if we carry on like this, we're just going to lose all profit that we've built up over the last few years. We need to have a rethink. If those discussions can have in a boardroom, then the impact on the organization as a whole is so much less, because you've done the quality thinking, you've come up with a quality answer, and then the organization has a clear direction to move forward. So that's what this Ashby's law of requisite variety is really trying to talk about. Put in processes and procedures. The fear of the unknown is largely driven because we can't get our hands around it. So put in systems that will control some of the variables, then bring in people that will see the rest. So the more variety you have in thinking in the boardroom, the more likely you are to see all the different pieces of this puzzle and be able to react to them and do something with it. So this homeostasis is the way in which complex systems operating in changing environments. And we need to succeed in maintaining and managing those critical variables and tighten those defined limits so that we can actually cater or cope with all this change. So COVID being a classic example. Did we have someone on our team who was clued up on medical? Did we bring someone into our board meetings who was really clued up on the medical aspects so we can actually make proper decisions and move forward? We're not just frozen. So it's this number of states that a control mechanism is capable of attaining. Its variability must be greater or equal to the number of states of the system being controlled. So how complex is the environment you operate in, and make sure you can manage more complexity that it's going to throw at you. So conclusion, loss of control. If you understand whether you're playing the game of craft or playing enterprise, then if you're playing the game of craft, then loss of control is not really something you need to worry about, because you are in control. And there's no reason why you should bring in non-exec directors into the organization. I don't believe that's going to add significant value. Definitely bring advisors in, definitely have a personal coach, get some mentors, etc., etc. But a board structure is going to be too much for an organization that's basically founder-led and who is the best skilled person in that company. And the stages of growth. So if you've taken the decision to go the enterprise, look at where you are in the stages of growth. And again, if you're in very early stage, you're still in the process of even thinking about how you delegate and add other operational roles to spread the load and stop you having to do everything. Bring in a finance person so you don't have to do the accounting. Bring in a chief operating officer, because then someone else can make sure the machinery of the business is running effectively. If you're still in that process, again, it's probably too early stage to really benefit from having a board, but at least you can start planning about what that might look like. Train yourself up in what it looks like to be a director. What are the practicalities of being a director? Because those will add value even if you don't have a formal board. You can start documenting things and do the cover your ass kind of checks and balances stuff that will help anyway. Fear of the unknown, do some training. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Speak to others. Again, get mentors, read, do courses. Obviously, CERDOC can help you with director training courses, but do any course that is relevant to get rid of that fear of the unknown, because now you have a better sense of what the reality is and what the variability and the complexity is, and how do you get your hands around it. And high cost, low value, assess what you need and bring in the right people. So you could have a very low cost board because you've brought people in who are junior directors and you work together and build this thing together. You could bring in one director, bring in an independent chairman. It could be someone who, again, is not looking to earn a massive amount of money from this thing. They're not looking for a shareholding in your business. They're actually just looking to do something useful with their time because they're in retirement or semi-retirement. So it doesn't have to be costly. If you want to get someone in who's going to bring in real value, then you may have to pay for something, but they should be giving the value in far excess to what it's costing you. So bring in the right people. So next steps, Jenny, just maybe put that poll up, and then we'll just go through any Q&A questions. We've got one here. Will you send the recording to attendees? That's a very easy question to answer. Yes, we will be sending the recording as part of the email follow-up after the session. So based on today, if you have next steps, what do you want to do? Would you like a call with me? So a free consult with me, happy to just talk about your business. Where are you at? What is appropriate? What does the next step look like? Whether it's anything to do with our products or services is immaterial. We're here to try and help you take this jump and move to the next level. By all means, let us know if you'd like the director fee survey. We can email it to you. You can download it on the website, etc. Definitely worth reading to get a sense of what you're letting yourself in for in terms of the cost, but also giving an indication of what people see as being the values. And yes, we can definitely help you with training options. So we've got everything from one-day workshops to an 11-month applied directorship program, which a lot of aspiring non-exec directors have been doing because it really takes their understanding of how this thing works to a whole new level. And interestingly, I'm talking to quite a few executive directors who are looking at getting investment and growing their business through mergers and acquisitions, and they've realized that they need to upskill themselves before they bring in external parties to make sure they don't get hoodwinked or pushed, railroaded into doing things in a particular way. They at least can say, well, hold on, that's not the way it should be done, or that's not the way we want it to be done. So thank you for your time. Any other questions? Nothing else in the Q&A box? Anyone got any other questions? So particularly maybe one that comes up regularly is about family business particularly. First generation tends to be more of that sort of craft kind of mindset because you've got the whole family team that's running the business. It's very much about their skill and ability, and typically the skill and ability of the founder. Second generation, if you've got someone that's really keen to take over and manage the business and has the right skills and abilities to do that, then that transition can be fairly straightforward because maybe the son or daughter has been part of the business for years, so they've learned how things work around here over a long period of time. It's been ingrained in them and they can take that forward. Where the family businesses really start to struggle is in typically the third and fourth generation. And that's when processes, procedures, etc., and starting to think about a business that's not reliant on the individual becomes so important. Because you either got a very diverse family, and who you're going to pick to be in charge of this particular business, or you've got very few people in the family who are even interested in being part of the business. They're just seeing it as a way of getting a dividend every year and doing something else. That's when thinking about this board, bringing the training in, encouraging the family members to really have an understanding about their role as shareholders versus directors versus managers really helps. because it cuts down so much noise. It cuts down so many emotional conversations because everybody has a clear understanding of what the value is of this organization. So unless there's anything else, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us on the call. And stay in touch. So when you're ready, we'll be here. Reach out and feel free to arrange a consult. Just get on a call, drop us an email, etc., and we'll see how we can help. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the week, and all the best for a fabulous 2022. And let's hope that it's a lot less stressful and a lot more productive and a lot more financially beneficial than the last 2 years have been for some businesses. Thank you very much. Bye for now.